Hey everybody. So I was thinking today, maybe this is a hot take and maybe it's obvious to some of you, I don't know. But I think it's actually okay to think about what other people think of you and to maybe worry to an extent. I don't know, worry is kind of a negative connotation. So be concerned or to just, let's go back to what I originally said, just think about what other people think about you and to try to put your best foot forward sometimes. I think that's okay, even in social situations, not just in the obvious cases when you're trying to get a job or some kind of resources or a business transaction, but in general, I think we face a lot of pressure in from society to not worry about what society thinks. And why is that we face that pressure, and why is it okay to actually think about what other people think of you? Well, I think first of all, we admire people who don't seem to care what other people think about them. And that's because it can be exhausting if you're thinking about it all the time or too much. It would be nice to be able to let that weight off of your shoulders, to be able to relax in public or in social situations if you're unable to do that. And we admire people who are able to do that, but that's kind of out of our own laziness. We don't want to work to impress other people. That's only a small part of the puzzle, though. It's also, we like being around people who don't care. I mean, I can only speak from my own perspective, but when someone is rude to an extent, there's a fine line with this because if someone is too rude, obviously you don't want to be around them. But if someone seems to not care what other people think, to me, I like being around people like that, people who are crass, because that means I don't have to worry so much about what I say. And it's really comfortable for me to be around people who maybe are a little more on the narcissistic side or would be judged as being more narcissistic, because I'm not saying that I necessarily would want to have a deep relationship with people who fit into that box. But in general, in public, if someone says something that's so crass or maybe insults me a little bit or something like that, I feel comfortable around that person because I know this person is unfiltered. I don't have to work so hard and watch what I say. And even saying that makes me a little uncomfortable because I am I am telling you that I care what other people think, at least until I realize they don't care what I think, if that makes sense. And I want to give the impression that I don't care what other people think. But in doing that, I'm caring what other people think. This really can spiral out of control. But I'm trying to get back on track here and reel it in a little bit. We are faced with so much pressure to care what other people think, or I'm sorry, to not care what other people think. But I think in some cases, you have to let yourself care what other people think. It takes work to care. That's why was I having such a hard time finding that word in the beginning. Think about what other people think. Care about what other people think does not necessarily mean that you're worried about what other people are thinking, but you care to an extent. And I think being isolated is not a bad thing. Enjoying your solitude is not a bad thing if it is for the right reasons. But if it is for the reason that you're afraid or you're lazy, I think those are the wrong reasons. So if you spend so much time in solitude because it's so much easier than putting up the mask that you have to wear in public or getting dressed up and going out, I don't necessarily believe that that is the right reason, because you can get used to behaving the way you're supposed to and build up your strength for that and your willpower for that while you are alone, so that when you do have the chance to go out in public, it doesn't seem like so much work. So if you're home, and especially if you don't have a lot of other stuff to do. I mean, personally, I think I enjoy my solitude because I have a lot of things that I can do alone. And some of that is maybe preparing for being out in public. If I exercise and take care of myself, I'm going to be honest, that's not only for myself, that's so that I look good, so that people respect me, so that I'm able to be healthy is only part of it. Maybe it's the biggest part, I don't know. But there are things that I do when I'm alone. Even recording this video right now is a way for me to be able to articulate and socialize so that when I do go out, I'm not stammering all over my words. I'm more comfortable speaking, and I'm thinking about putting my best foot forward, and I think that's okay. Even playing guitar, I don't know that it's all intrinsically motivated because I'm still showing that to you, and I'm still playing. Maybe someday I'll play in front of people as I have before, even more, and I want to be prepared for that. Even if that moment is rare, I can still think about that. I can still synthesize the happiness of doing that. Anyway, I'm reeling this back in a little bit, and I know that I'm all over the place, but I did have another reason, and I want to make sure I went over that. So we want to be like people who don't seem to care what other people think, because it is exhausting to care what other people think. And that's one of the things I've already mentioned. But it's also another thing that I wanted to mention before I play a couple bars for you, is that it's exhausting to be around people who care so much what other people think, because we want them to feel comfortable. So if I'm with someone who I know really needs a reflection, or their self-esteem depends on what I think of them, that's a lot of pressure for me. So I want to be able to make them feel good about themselves. I want people to feel good about themselves, but I don't want to be the sole one responsible for making them feel good about themselves. This is this was a little bit harder for me to get out for some reason. I think I'm kind of losing my train of thought here. I'm fasting, by the way, but actually I can't use that as an excuse, because that clears your mind, and that's making my mind even more clear. So let me get back to what I was saying. Basically, when people look for reflections from other people, and you sense that, and you know that you're with someone who needs that reassurance, you want them to feel good, but it's exhausting constantly having to give them compliments and having to reassure them. So that's another reason maybe in some cases we prefer to be around people who don't care necessarily what other people think about them. But that can go too far too, because to me, it's really more off-putting when someone really truly doesn't care what other people think about them. And I know I'm contradicting what I said earlier, because I do like to be around people who kind of don't care what other people think, or don't put a lot of emphasis on what other people think. But if people are so crass that they are just, I don't know that I should say crass, because I do like to be around people who are crass, but people who are so bold, who are so brave, maybe. I think this is really difficult thing to think about, but it's okay to show your true self if your true self is someone that I like. But if you show your true self and that is not someone that I like, I'm not going to admire you just because you showed me your true self, if that makes sense. That's where I think I'll leave it at this point, is that just being honest and just being unfiltered doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to like someone like that. But if they're honest and unfiltered and I like the person, then it's really, uh, it's great. It's double great. Okay, I don't know. Anyway, that's a good time to stop. I can now hear the leaf blowers in the background, so hopefully that won't be too loud, and I can play a couple bars for you here. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up there, and you can probably maybe hear the leaf blowers in the background, so it's a good time to stop when they get started. It can be quite annoying, but I'm not going to get negative. Anyway, in closing, I'm just going to say that I feel like I'm going to think more about this, but there needs to be a balance between how much we care about what other people think and how much of a filter we're willing to put up, and vulnerability. And maybe that's something that I'll get into in my next video. Is vulnerability is vulnerability overrated? Do we need to be more vulnerable and let our guard down more, or do we need to maybe work on, I think, who we're vulnerable with, and is the important thing to think about? And is vulnerability overrated in general? I don't know. Maybe it's different for men than it is for women. That's one of the things I was thinking about as well. But as I said, I'm going to wrap up the video. Hope you have enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. And I will keep it going with these and always try to improve, as I said, and keep living the good life. See you next time. Thanks.